All right, so you are getting ready to deal with a narcissist, and you know, you're in the middle of drama, trauma, and chaos for sure. And you can't even think straight half the time because you're under siege. That's what happens when you go into the discard phase of a narcissistic relationship. Remember, there's the love bombing, then there's the devaluing, then there's the discarding. And if you want to know more about those three phases, definitely check out my videos on each one of those topics. But when you're in that discard phase, that's when you start to see the birth of the smear campaign, and all these things are coming at you at once. And when you are in that phase, the narcissist basically wants to take you down. They want to get you before you get them. So you're going to start to see them doing things. They're going to start lining up their flying monkeys. They're going to, you know, meaning these third parties. What flying monkeys are was a reference to the Wizard of Oz. And the Wicked Witch had her flying monkeys, and these people who just sort of like sat on the side of the evil person and just kind of went along and didn't really realize what was going on. And that's what flying monkeys actually really are. I mean, they're people that the narcissist is lined up to be on their side or against you. And in their perfect world, both, right? On their side and against you, which is perfect for them. And they want you to feel like you are ganged up on. They want you to feel like you are isolated, that you are out of it, that you're excluded, that there's nothing more for you, because they want you to be suffering. I've actually had somebody who said, you know, I think that he wants me to kill myself. That's not the case, actually, because if you did that, then they wouldn't have any more narcissistic supply. What they really want is to just make you miserable. They get off on that. It's totally sick. I mean, that's what it is for them. They actually kind of get a high out of making people miserable. And that's why they drag out litigation. That's why the negotiation process takes so long. You know, I have a private Facebook group, which, by the way, you are certainly welcome to join. It's called Narcissist Negotiators with Rebecca Zung, and I did a survey in there and asked people, how long did your litigation take? How much did it cost you? And do you know that a huge percentage of people said it cost more than $100,000 and it took more than 3 years? Why do you think that is? Because you are dealing with a narcissist in negotiation at that point. And what's driving them? It's not to come to a nice resolution. It's not even to win. No. Newsflash for you. A narcissist is not in it just to win. They are in it to make you miserable, to devalue you, to squash you, to hurt you before you hurt them, to make sure that everybody knows that whatever happened with the relationship was your fault and that they're the perfect ones and that you're the villain. They might even call you the narcissist. You never know, but that's what's going on. So when you are in this entire process of negotiation, what are some signs of malicious intent? One of the very first big, huge, honking red, arrows should be that they constantly move the goalposts. And why do they constantly move goalposts? Well, if you want to know more about that, you should definitely check out my video on why narcissists constantly move goalposts. But why do they do that? They do that because they enjoy the process of making you squirm, manipulating you, intimidating you, scaring you, dragging it out. And so what does moving the goalposts mean? It means that you will get some kind of an offer from them. And even if you go back and you say, I'll take exactly your offer, word for word, every single thing that you put in your offer, I accept. They'll come back with, sorry, that's no longer available. or it's available, but I'm adding this, or I'm taking away that. And why do they do that? They do that because it drives you crazy, because it allows them to continue to lead you around by the nose. It's like a little ring in your nose that they're leading you around by. They love it. And they love seeing you squirm, and they love asserting that control over you. So that's a huge red flag that you're dealing with someone who has malicious intent, is constantly moving the goalposts. And if you think that what they're doing is so sick, give me a so sick in the comments. The second big red flag that you know that you're dealing with somebody who has malicious intent in a negotiation is you see these ultimatums like right from the beginning. I just recently had this. I was representing a woman in a divorce, and her very malignant narcissistic husband was coming in to negotiate. We had a mediation set up, and he comes in and he starts right off with, I want my dogs back. Now, these dogs that he wasn't taking care of. They were starving, and his adult daughter went and got the dogs and brought them to her house and refused to give them to him. This wasn't even anything that my client had anything to do with, other than the fact that she's on better terms with the daughter than he is. And he starts off the mediation saying, I'm not doing anything today until I get my dogs back. I want the dogs. Go get the dogs. Go bring them to me. You know, and everybody's supposed to scatter around and do exactly what he wants. He really was trying to show the world, everybody there, that he's in charge, that this is how this is going to go. I'm in charge of the day. And so he picked something that was quite ridiculous and made everybody squirm about it. And here's the mediator over talking to us and saying, what can you do about the dogs? And my client's on the phone with the daughter. Can you get the dogs? Can you do something with the dogs? And the daughter's like, I'm not giving up the dogs. So here we spent the first hour and a half of the mediation not even talking about anything that has to do with the divorce. There's a very huge red flag of somebody who had malicious intent. His intent was to control. His intent was not to come to a peaceful and reasonable resolution of that case. So that's another huge red flag, is that you see these ultimatums happening right away. And a third red flag that somebody has malicious intent is that they're not actually coming to the table. They're not trying to mediate at all. They just are constantly dragging out the case, more discovery, sending out motions, doing all these things, but you can't get them to actually come to the table and have a conversation with you about resolving the case or the issue, whatever it is. You can't, you know, what is it that you want? They don't give you an offer. They just completely avoid the entire conversation. There's another example of malicious intent.
How to negotiate with a narcissist, which, you know, usually is like, you don't even know how to do that, right? And, you know, you end up having this fear, sweaty palms, your heart's racing, you're thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to get what I want from this person because they're just completely unreasonable, right? Which is, you know, a lot of the case sometimes, but there are ways to get people to do what you want. Part of the thing is that you have to start thinking about how you're going to create some leverage, because what leverage is really in a negotiation is to incentivize the other side to give you what you want, or at least give in to some of the things that they don't want, or that they think they want, and then, you know, give them incentive to figure out how you're going to get what you want, right? So that creating leverage is figuring out what the other side really wants, what's important to them, what means the most to them, and then figuring out a way to give that to them in a certain sense, but also incentivize them to give you what you want. Because when you're figuring out your best case scenario and your worst case scenario, remember that your best case scenario is their worst case scenario usually, and vice versa. And nobody's going to give in to their worst case scenario. Who's ever going to do that, right? So the trick is to come up with what it is that you really want, and then add a lot of stuff to that. So you come up with, I want this, I want that, but you decide ahead of time what it is that you're going to be willing to give up. And so then you come out with your first offer out of the gate. It has way more in it that you actually want, but you're going to be willing to give in. You're sort of controlling the process. You're kind of trying to control how much you're going to be able to give up, but you've decided ahead of time what that's going to be. Okay. And then once you let them feel like they've beaten you, then you just do your best Meryl Streep and you go, okay, I guess this is terrible. Oh my God, I can't believe I had to give in all this, but I did. So, and then the other person thinks that they've robbed you and they've gotten it all over you, which is fine, because if you end up with what you want, then who cares, right? Where you really get stuck is when you get into this game of, you know, I have to beat the other person. I can't let them show me up, because you'll never win in that game with a narcissist. You know, they're willing to scorch the earth to get what they want. So the trick is really deciding ahead of time what it is that you're going to give in on, and then let them think that they beat you, even though you actually got what you want.
Fed up with narcissists walking all over you? Sick of everyone believing their lies while you're paying through the nose in attorney's fees? What if you could hold all the cards for a change? Hey, I'm Rebecca Zung. I'm a top 1% trial attorney, a USA Today bestselling author, and I've spent my entire career helping people slay narcissists in negotiations, most recently through my proven slay method. What if your suffering could become your superpower? Imagine turning all that pain into power, not just for you, but for others too. This is your chance to take back control. You can finally win. Become a high conflict negotiation certified coach. Help others while transforming your own life, and do good for the world. This is your chance. Go to RebeccaZung.com/apply, and I'll show you how to turn the tables for good starting today.
So you're getting ready to go into a negotiation. You're wondering, what should you say? What should you not say? What should you definitely stay away from? And believe me, there are certain phrases that you definitely do not want to say. So number one is, I'm giving this an hour, or I'm giving this 30 minutes, and then I'm out of here. So you don't want to start off with like you're giving us some time frame that puts everybody on edge right away. And now everybody thinks they need to hurry up or whatever. That's definitely a narcissist move, by the way. I've seen narcissists do that a lot, where they come in and they start throwing around like, I'm only staying this long, or I'm only staying that long, and that's it. And then I'm out of here. Because they want everybody to be on edge right away. They want everybody to be like scurrying and scrambling and trying to hurry up to try to get things done. And they want to try to control the process. They want people to be afraid, nervous about what's going to happen or whatever. So it is definitely not something that's highly recommended, especially when you want to resolve your issues. And especially if you are dealing with a narcissist, because that's not going to help them. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help them want to work with you. Okay, so don't start off with, I'm only staying for X amount of time. That will definitely put somebody on edge. So, you know, the purpose of these phrases and this video today is to let you know what kinds of things you want to stay away from saying, because you want to try to actually get something done. If you actually want to get somewhere with your negotiation, then you want to try to avoid using these phrases. Okay? So another one that you definitely want to stay away from is something like, this is my final offer. Take it or leave it. This is it. especially if you're early on in the process. Now, if you're down the road, y'all have been sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and you've already been back and forth. You already know what your choke point is. You've done your risk assessment. By the way, if you want to know all the things that I'm talking about, grab my free Crush My Negotiation prep worksheet at winmynegotiation.com. That will help you do all of these things. But you've already figured out what your best case scenario is, what your worst case scenario is, what your choke point is, what your walk away point is, those are the same. And you've gone, okay, now this is my final offer, fine. But you don't walk in and start off at the beginning going, this is the deal, take it or leave it. If you don't take it, I'm out of here. Because that's not going to, nobody's taking that. I mean, even if it's a deal that you want, just imagine that it's presented to you in that way. You're going to go, oh, no, because, you're kind of acting like a jackass, right? So you don't want to do that. So if you want something to actually be done, you actually want something to be considered, where you can actually maybe get some, ground in this thing and gain something out of it, then you don't start off with, here's the deal, take it or leave it, right? And if you are so ready to get this done, give me a get this done in the comments below. Okay, so the next word that you never want to say straight up in a negotiation is no, because that's not going to help either. When you're dealing with a narcissist, especially, they hate the word no. And by the way, you should also check out my video on words narcissists hate. And definitely no is one of them, even if it is a no. I mean, you might want to just say, I'll consider it. What's your reasoning for this offer? It's always good to know what their reasoning is behind the offer. Why is it that they're offering this? Get them to talk a little bit, because one of the things that is really important to know is that even if you don't settle in mediation or in the negotiation or in arbitration or whatever it is that you're in that particular conversation and you don't have a resolution, it's a great way to get information. It's a great information gathering time. So get them to tell you more about it. Why is it that you think that this is a good deal? Why is it that you think that I should take this? What supporting documentation do you have? What arguments are you going to be using down the road if we don't settle this now? Why do you think that it would be a good deal for me? And why is it a good deal for you? Why is it that you want this deal? Ask more questions rather than just say no straight up off the bat. Because if you just say no, you're just going to piss them off. You're going to annoy them. They're going to get up. They're going to walk away. And then you've lost the opportunity, even if your answer is straight up no, to get more information and gather more documentation that you could potentially use. And by the way, if they start giving you all of their arguments and all of their documentation, then the next time you go to sit down for a conversation, you know exactly how to refute that. You know exactly what research you need to do so that you can be prepared for whatever the next meeting is, if there is going to be one. So don't just say no straight up off the bat for a number of reasons. One being that you're not going to get anywhere with that. And second, you're actually losing an opportunity for yourself to gain more information. The next one is never use any kind of a devaluation or any kind of a slur, or even using any kind of tone where you're like, yeah, I know that this is what you want, but you're not getting it, or that's ridiculous and that's never going to happen. That's actually another good phrase never to use, which is that's never going to happen, because that's, again, you don't want to put people in a situation where they're immediately put off, where they immediately are just like, why am I having this conversation? Let me just get up. Let me just leave right now. You want to hold them there. You want them to have a conversation with you. And so the longer that you can be in conversation with each other, the more rapport that you can build. And so in building a rapport, you definitely don't want to be slurring the people. Certainly don't use any kind of racial slurs, any kind of gender slurs, anything against religion, or anything about the person as a human being. You know, you really never want to get personal when it comes to negotiating. You don't want to say, you know, something about, you know, like your mom is an alcoholic or something, like, you know, Eddie Murphy with the ice cream man thing. You know, I mean, you don't want to say things like that, right? Clearly that's way off topic and way so far afield, and will just inflame the situation and cause the person to go, well, I'm never having any kind of conversation with you. And maybe you're fine with that, you know? I mean, obviously you want to know before you go into the room where your parameters are and what your walk away point is. But if you're in conversation with this person, then that means that you do want something from them. And you have to remember that all people want to feel seen, heard, and valued. All people want to know that they matter in some way. And that's why my book is called Negotiate Like You Matter. And the acronym, MATTER, is actually the acronym for how to negotiate, because all people want to feel that they matter. Now, obviously, if you're dealing with a narcissist, it's like heightened by a gazillion, because they have to be the focal point, and, you know, they really want to know that they matter. But you always need to make sure that you're providing value for value. Nobody's going to settle for their worst day. You know, remember, your best day is probably the other side's worst day. And nobody's going to have a conversation when it means that they're settling for their worst possible scenario. So, you know, deciding ahead of time what it is that you're going to give up will really be helpful. Now, when you're dealing with a narcissist, you might kind of like use a decoy and act like the thing that you're giving up is the thing you really wanted, when it's really something you were going to be willing to give up in the first place. You kind of have to ethically manipulate the manipulator a little bit. And if you want to know more about that, check out my video on manipulating the narcissist, because that's something you definitely have to do when you are dealing with a narcissist. The point of all of this is you don't want to use any kind of language that's going to cause the person to immediately go, that's it, I'm out of here. I'm not having this conversation, because you're putting them on edge right away. I mean, even when you go to tackle the issues, you know, one of the T's in my MATTER, MATTER, is tackle hard issues second, meaning start with areas where you might agree and then work toward the more contested issues, because then you're building a rapport. You're building a situation where you feel like the momentum is going. You're actually covering ground. You're making headway. And so any kind of languaging that is going to make the other person feel like they've been insulted, like they're being controlled, like they're not being respected, like they're not being heard, that they don't feel valued, is not going to be helpful to the resolution process. And if resolution and coming to an agreement is what it is that you want, then staying away from those particular words will help you, and it will go a long way. And now we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts. One of the things that I say that people should definitely do is document.
Yes,
and I know you tell your
the
clients that
same
too.
thing. You know, it's a good place to start, because I think it is, if it's the only do you do, you're in good shape. And I don't just use this document recommendation just in marriages and close relationships and divorces. I make it a strong suggestion in workplace issues, in, you know, other kinds of disputes you may be having, sometimes even in family issues. And it's interesting, my motivation for documentation, as you can imagine, it's to substantiate a legal argument, yes, but it's also to help with your sanity. Because sometimes people are like, no, maybe that didn't happen. I'm like, no, sweetie, in your journal on January 5th, it happened. You wrote it down. They're like, oh, yeah. So, you know, the narcissistic relationships are absolutely impacted by euphoric recall. People strangely are able to remember the good stuff about these really bad relationships. The documentation sometimes becomes a place where you can say, yeah, no, this isn't healthy.
Well, it's that, and I would add to that the reason, another really good reason to document is that narcissists are pathological liars. So you will catch them in lies if you document. And I've won entire cases on people's notes. So, you know, and there's really no limit to how detailed you can be. It's really kind of just how meticulous you want to be. Because, you know, if they're late for picking up the kids, if they're late for a payment on something, if they made a snide remark, if they wrote an email that was not reflective of a conversation and they tried to pawn it off as a conversation that you had, something like that, you know, just any little thing that just seems off to you, just take note of it. Because, you know, when you ask the question, how is he or she getting away with this, which you're going to ask that, and I always say there's no like divorce fairies that come out and stop people from doing things. So, you know, they won't get away with it if you end up in front of the judge and you have the proper documentation.
It is a, you know, I always say to people, you know, want to know how you know you're being gaslighted or in a relationship with a narcissist? I'll tell you. You, in arguments, you put text messages in front of them, you feel compelled to record conversations, and you feel the need to write long novels of emails to them to explain your feelings. You're doing that because you're not being heard and because you are being gaslighted so much that you have to show them this proof. This is taking this to another level and for a different reason. Again, it's to provide that substantiation. And it's not just about writing things down, it's about saving everything. You must save every text message. You must save every voicemail. You must save every email. Nothing can go. You're going to start to feel like a hoarder before this is done, but you're going to have to do it because sometimes it's just that one message. And one thing I do also strongly encourage people to do, print it all out. And there's actually apps out there that allow you to download all your text messages and print them all out. Create a printout because in case something blows up with your phone or your email server or something, then at least you have the hard evidence. It's got to have dates, times, all of that. Print it all out. You might even want to get into like a once-a-month cycle where you print everything out and put it someplace safe.
Yeah. A couple of things I want to just make a comment on what you just said. Number one is for your own sake too. Remember that every text and every email and every writing is a potential trial exhibit. So if you don't want to see it again,
Thank you.
Do not write it.
Yep, I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it will, if you don't want to see it again at a very inopportune time, meaning like in front of the judge, you know, where you're now having to explain and defend yourself, don't write it, don't send it.
But this becomes a great point of leverage because I'll tell you, nothing incenses a narcissist more than when you're not giving them equally long, bizarre text, like those long text messages that require you to click again to see the whole thing.
Right.
So what happens is if you give brief responses like, okay, let's talk later, they're going to just give you verbal diarrhea, which is great. So it's just you get two for the price of one. You don't engage and put your stuff down where you don't want it to be, and you get them just sort of putting it all out there, which you now have for later. So that's good.
And the other point I wanted to make about what you said was, you know, you feel this need to show them and defend it, you know, prove to them that what they said was wrong, whatever. Don't do that.
No, I agree. Yep.
Don't do that. That's your leverage. Don't resist the urge to want to do that in the moment and prove to them. So listen, people, you're dealing with narcissists. Narcissists are not going to accept constructive feedback and make changes to their behavior based on their on your feedback and reflect on it and all of that stuff. It's not happening. So you can show them a text message that directly counteracts exactly what they just said, proves that they're lying, and somehow they will manipulate that away that it's not a lie. So, and even if it makes no sense whatsoever, I mean, sometimes they say things that make no sense whatsoever. But just resist that urge to want to show them the leverage. That would be a don't. You know, create your leverage, do that, but don't give it away too early.
And it's a classic, it's a poker game. You would not ever sit in a casino and say, or a card game and say, look at my cards, everyone. Take a look. And now let's bet. So it's the same thing. It's just playing poker. What are some of the other big do's?
So I would say that you want to involve people that are going to be able to support you for sure. So you want to have a definite support system, but not people that are going to fan the flames and that sort of thing. So, you know, have a support team around you. Get a really good lawyer who understands narcissism. We talked about that in the last video too. So if you haven't watched that video, you should go check it out.
Get a really good psychologist or therapist who understands narcissism as well. Like, I cannot stress this one enough. It's not because I'm trying to create business for my field, but this idea of a support system, a lot of the people around you cannot have this conversation. If they've never experienced it, I'm amazed at how many people, my friends even, read my books and they're like, this seems really interesting, but I don't get it. Now you can, it doesn't bother me because it's like, okay, I get that you don't get it. But if I was going through a narcissistic relationship, I would feel very gaslighted and lost. So the beauty of therapy with a therapist who understands narcissism is they get it, and the kinds of support and feedback you'll get from them will not leave you feeling that you've lost your mind, but rather that you feel understood and supported. So I do think you need to choose those, and you have to choose where you have the conversations. Not everyone in your network can hear the conversation.
Yeah, that's definitely
yeah.
true.
Yeah. Anything else you'd say about that?
So the other thing is to use video for depositions.
Interesting.
You know, a lot of people say, well, that's more expensive. Now we have to pay for a videographer. Well, okay, I'm going to tell you, you're already paying a court reporter. You're already paying your lawyer. You're going through this expense. You know, don't cheap out and not spend an extra couple $100 for the videographer, because what happens with the depositions is the court reporter can only take down, you know, what is your name? My name is, you know, John Adams or whatever. And then it just, so when you see it on the page, it just looks
very
like
different.
type.
I agree.
But what narcissists will do is they're going to try to rile you up. They're going to try to unnerve you. So they're going to make faces. They're going to make little things under their breath.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to try to do things that upset you.
Yep.
Things that they know are upsetting you. They're going to pass notes to their lawyer so that it makes it look like they're saying something about you, and you're wondering what's going on with that. And so, you know, my normal listeners will know, like I just say, like, they're just less likely to act like a complete jackass if you have, because, you know, that's how they can act, especially the grandiose ones and the malignant ones, right? So using video for deposition can definitely help to rein in their behavior.
Any other do's?
Let me see. I have gather as much supporting documentation on everything as possible. So you're going to want to, you know, do your research. Do your research for your side. So one of the things that I say all the time is, when you're dealing with a narcissist, people tend to be so focused on defending against what that narcissist is doing that they forget to prepare their own case.
That's right. That's interesting.
And you know, it's just like in football. If all you have is a great defense and you have no offense, then you have no case.
Right.
And if your only case is just tearing down the other person, you aren't going to get anything that you want.
So, you know, and here's where it's interesting, because people who have been in narcissistic relationships who may not have already done the reading and gotten the education, they do what anyone would do if they feel they're being attacked or their reality is being doubted. They defend themselves. So after the life history of this relationship, where all they do is defend themselves, it can be often very difficult to turn that switch off.
Right.
And even in the work I do in working with survivors of narcissistic abuse, it's that don't defend yourself part. You have to have nerves of steel when someone is hurling all these bizarre, unfounded accusations at you, to nod at them and say, okay, and then walk away. And not engage it. I mean, and to me, I tell people, like, you know what? Forget all this meditation breathing. Like, this is your meditation. Like, toughening up and saying, I'm not going to respond to this. It takes more mindfulness. I mean, you could probably bend a spoon with the amount of mindfulness it takes to not defend to someone who is going after you. But you know now, after 10, 15, 20, 25 years of defending yourself against this person, it gets you nowhere.
Gets you nowhere. And
it's time to stop.
And how you will feel better. And I actually asked somebody that I worked with in my work on coaching them through dealing with litigation with a narcissist. I said, how did you feel before I started working with you? And this happened to be a guy who was dealing with a narcissist ex-wife, and he said, helpless and abused.
Yep.
And, you know, but what we did was we turned it around by creating a plan, a game plan, a framework where he was actually going on the offensive.
Great. That's great.
And
I like
that's
that.
and that's something that's almost foreign sometimes to people when they're just so used to defending, that they can actually turn around and take the controls and actually have the narcissist begging them to resolve the case.
Right.
It can happen.
Any other thoughts on do's before we turn to the don'ts?
I think that's basically what, because we covered having a strong lawyer, which is really important. We covered being prepared. You know, the only other thing I really want to say about being prepared is don't make the mistake of going into a mediation or a settlement discussion just thinking you're just going to have a conversation. You make sure you have your leverage ready to go. Make sure you are ready to go as if you're going to court, because if you want to incentivize that person to settle and save thousands and thousands of dollars on going to court, if you go to court, you're basically throwing, you know, your future destiny to the judge. And the judge might have a bad day. The judge might see things differently than you do. Judges make mistakes all the time. It's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to go. So it's better if you can settle in mediation or in a settlement discussion, if you can.
Right.
But they're not going to unless you've given them the incentive to do that.
And I'm going to land it on one last do, which, and maybe it's my head as a psychologist, and I've said this, the people on my YouTube friends, I know you're going to say, again, lady, you're going to say this, realistic expectations, radical acceptance. And the reason I say this is a do is that you almost have to get up with an intention like, okay, I got to keep it real. I know what's coming my way. Because when you do that, and again, the clients I do get to work with, you know, directly in my office, what we find is that we use our therapeutic sessions as a calibration. They're like, yeah, like, I feel like I'm slipping, and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen? And they're like, oh yeah. So it's so easy to want to put expectations about human behavior on this narcissistic person that are realistic. Like a normal person would do this. That's not what you're dealing with. Your expectations have to be skewed to what it is you're dealing with. Like I said, that's what I do with clients. That's, you know, therapists could do, some coaches do. I just, basically you drift back to like, but a normal person, I'm like, that's not what we're dealing with, darling. Let's get you back here.
So expect that they will do all of these things.
And so when it happens, you almost chuckle to yourself, even when some of these emails come back. And sometimes I didn't have the clients send me the email and say, you're not, and I'd actually start laughing. I'm like, here we go. And it's like clockwork. I mean, it's literally like clockwork. So that clockwork can be sort of settling to us.
It seems like every celebrity has access to GLP-1s these days, but what about the rest of us? Now you don't need to be rich or famous to access personalized, tailored weight loss solutions just for you. Through Hers, you can take control of your health. Hers is changing women's healthcare by providing access to holistic weight loss solutions, including GLP-1 treatments with the same active ingredients as Ozempic and Wegovy, oral medication kits, and more. You'll connect with a medical provider who will develop a plan based on your needs. And if prescribed, your medication is included as part of a doctor-designed weight loss program, complete with ongoing care, online support, all at no additional cost. Plans start at just $199 a month with a 12-month subscription, paid up front, and your treatment ships directly to your door. So if you've been struggling with weight loss and you want to find the right solution just for you, start your free online visit today at forhers.com/negotiate. That's forhers.com/negotiate for your personalized weight loss treatment options. Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded programs are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required, restrictions apply. Wegovy and Ozempic are not compounded.
So let's talk then about the don'ts. Because I think in some ways the do's, while reassuring, the don'ts are where we can really steer people away from the rocks.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit in the previous video about boundaries. And so I would say don't let them cross your boundaries. You know, once you have set an expectation, or you've said, you know, we're only going to use this app to communicate with, or I have exclusive occupancy of the house. You're not allowed to come over unless you email me first and get my permission. You're not allowed to show up at my office unless you ask me first. You know, whatever expectations you've set, you have to stick to it and don't allow them to cross those boundaries, because that's something that's very typical of all the narcissists. They don't believe that boundaries apply to them.
Well, that's the entitlement. The entitlement is boundaries don't count. They apply to you. And in fact, many times, the narcissist will weaponize boundaries. They'll learn that fancy word through the whole process of going through this, and they'll say, you're crossing my boundary, but they will do it organically. They've always done it. And I think, like you said, you nailed it. And we talked about this in the other videos too, is this idea of not wanting to seem like the stick in the mud, like, oh, okay, what do you mean you can't meet at Starbucks? Are you so rigid? Well, you don't want to be rigid girl, or rigid guy. So I think that you have to remember boundaries are an incredibly important foundation, because you're going to need them going forward. The divorce is just a process setting you up for the rest of your life. And as long as you particularly have minor children, this is going to be an issue. But even if you don't, I mean, one day these kids might get married or have a graduation, and on and on and on. The more you can stick to those boundaries and be consistent about them, the more they will be easier to practice in the future.
Yeah. So another don't is to get emotional or feel victimized or take things personally. I mean, it's all kind of the same boat there, just feeling, you know, hurt when they lie about you, or when they engage in their smear campaign, which is something they're probably going to do. You know, don't engage with that. You know, we talked about that, but you know, it's a really big don't, and it's really, really important that you try to look at it from a factual point of view, almost as if you're watching a movie of your life. Oh, I just see that he just said that to her, and then you're just going to say, okay, I see. You know, Dr. Bill Eddy, who I've interviewed on my show, and so for my listeners, you can go back and watch the interviews that I have with him in video form or on my podcast. He talks about the BIF method, which is brief, informative, friendly, and firm. But it's basically the whole premise of what he's saying is don't engage. Don't be pulled into the mud. Because as soon as you go off the handle, as soon as you're crying, screaming, yelling, fighting back, now you're in the mud with them. Now they know they have you.
And I think that this, you know, and listen, we're all saying this same thing. Bill Eddy, Dr. Romney, everybody is saying the same thing, okay? So it's that don't engage becomes this absolutely, you know, critical pivot on this. You know, I'm going to put my little bit of shrink wrap on this, which is, you know, you are feeling, okay? You are feeling. So no one can tell you don't, you know, to stop feeling. You will feel. It's how you communicate that feeling in a moment. So in many ways, what we're suggesting is actually quite superhuman. It's putting this strong tsunami of emotion behind a dam, and that it doesn't mean you'll never show it. You've got to find those places to show it. If you're in therapy of some kind, if you have trusted friends. Some people find other ways to sublimate it through creative approaches, through writing, through exercise, through spirituality. There's places that they take it. I even in my retreats come up with sort of ritualized exercises we do to help people let go of some of this, because some of it you have to express it or you will get sick. But it is this sense of one place you can actually get a lot of I don't know how to, self-possession in all of this. A relationship with a narcissist feels like you're constantly on a chaotic roller coaster that's about to go off the tracks all the time. And so you're always living in this fear, exhilaration, confusion kind of a situation. But what becomes interesting is if you can learn to be that serene self, and I often say you've got to channel this serenity. You're going to be calm, you're going to be tight, you're going to keep your answers brief. Once you practice that even just 1 or 2 times, you're going to recognize the power of it. And there's a power you feel in that moment. You may literally have to keep tears behind. You may go to the restroom and wipe them off. Anytime you do know you're going to be doing this kind of work, meeting with mediators, going to court, sitting in lawyers' offices, and having to encounter that narcissist again, keep your makeup kit and tissues and all that, because you may cry it all off in the bathroom. Put it all back on. Give yourself that out, but do not let them see the crack, because they will always exploit those beautiful vulnerabilities you have. But unfortunately, your vulnerabilities in their hands become weapons.
100%. And the more you do that, the more you slap that makeup back on and go back in there, the more powerful you'll feel, and the more confident you feel. That fake it till you make it really is true, actually. So my last don't is really just don't give in and don't give up, because they will try everything they can to get you to do that. I mean, you know, so just be patient and persevere, keep going, because it will be worth it in the end.
And I'm going to give you one last don't from my side, which you know is at the absolute central core of the thesis of my book, Should I Stay or Should I Go, is don't maintain false hope. Your relationship got this far because you came at it from a place of hope and fear. Hope that it might get better, they might change after this deadline, after the baby gets older, after this. It never happened. Okay, so don't maintain that false hope. The other thing that kept you in place was fear. I don't want to be alone forever. What will other people think? I vowed to myself I wouldn't get divorced. I'm not going to be able to afford to live, and on and on and on. That powerful alchemy of hope and fear is what keeps these relationships going. But it's critical as you go through this process, you don't maintain false hope. Part of your attorney's job is that you don't get to maintain that false hope. If you walk into your attorney's office and say, hey, I want everything and I want 100% custody, it's your attorney's job saying, sweetie, I mean, I'll get you what I can, but you ain't getting that.
If you have an attorney that says, oh, I'll get you 100% of his paycheck for alimony and 100% custody, keep going.
So
find a different lawyer.
So you don't want to get those false hopes, maintained, and people, I can't begin to tell you how many people out there said, I got this, and once the judge sees what a jerk he is, they're going to give me everything. And then they go and sit in an attorney's office, and the attorney says, here's what we're looking at. And the person will say, you mean that the judge is potentially going to let them have the kids half the time? They said, potentially, you can count on it. And for a lot of people, they said, and they're completely shattered. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, that is such a good point. So I talk about divorce law versus divorce justice. Those are my little words for it. So divorce law is what's going to happen, and that's how it just gets applied. The judges, I mean, in mediation, you might be able to veer off from the law a little bit, but if you end up in front of a judge, the judge's job, they're sworn to apply the law. That's all they can do. That is all they can do. If they don't apply the law, they'll get appealed. They won't get reelected. All kinds of bad things start to happen to them. Judges get graded on how many times they get appealed. So, they're not going to do anything other than apply the law. And so, these people have these notions that people are going to go in and the heavens are going to open.
TV
and
justice.
they're going to see what a horrible person he's been to me, and he's going to give me everything. That is not going to happen. It's just not. So, divorce justice doesn't happen. And the gavels are not magic wands. They can't make the other person be a good person. They can't make them into a good dad. They can't make them into having a conscience. They can't make them care. There's only so much they can order them to do.
And remember, and this is one thing I got into one of my YouTube videos you may want to check out, narcissism isn't against the law. It feels like it should be against the law, but it's not against the law. So even if that judge, and you may never hear it from her or him, might be thinking, oh my God, this guy is such a jerk. That is not against the law. And at the end of the day, as Rebecca's saying, that is their job, to see through the law. They deliver that. And listen, I've heard people hear things as harsh from judges as saying, you chose this person. It's not the job of this court to correct your bad decision making. And it's devastating for people to hear. It's devastating. It really is. sadly, yes, there may be a grain of truth to it. However, and this is in my big fantasy Dr. Ramani world, is all of what we're talking about. I wish people could see this before they even really start dating and getting married.
So
I mean,
true.
that to me, my mission is to teach people to be better gatekeepers. So you don't sit in a courtroom one day and you think about the 10,000 red flags you ignored
that you
to get you to
turned
that
pink
day,
or whatever.
and then when the judge finally says to you, like, you made this choice, I know that, and it is not the job of the court to fix that mess. It really isn't.
No.
But hopefully they could get it righter than they do, because they often don't get it right, frankly. And then in the next issue being that it isn't against the law. And I think it's heartbreaking. I wish it was, and if I ran the world, it would be, but I don't.
Yeah.
So
and it's not against being, you can have narcissistic parents too, and it doesn't, it's not grounds for taking custody from them.
It's really
so
not.
unfortunately,
yeah, it's a tough one.
So don't give in and don't give up. And don't have false hope.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with a narcissist, be it a covert narcissist, a grandiose narcissist, or a malignant narcissist, they engage in all kinds of behaviors, even while you are just in a relationship with them. They're gaslighting you, they're lying to you, they're manipulating you, perhaps even being abusive. More than likely, they're being abusive. Some are sneakier at it than others. Covert narcissists in particular are very sneaky at it. And so if you are dealing with a covert narcissist, I have several videos on covert narcissists, including why covert narcissists are dangerous and the covert passive aggressive narcissist. And you're going to want to check out those videos for sure if you're dealing with covert narcissists. But whatever kind of narcissist you're dealing with, they are being their narcissist selves the entire time that you're in a relationship with them. So there are three phases to a narcissistic relationship. It's love bombing, devaluing, and discarding. And remember that the phases of the relationship don't actually happen in a linear fashion. They happen at the same time sometimes. They can be devaluing you while they're love bombing you. And in fact, there was a study done by a psychologist with monkeys that showed that if monkeys were given a reward for doing something good every single time, nothing happened in their brain. But if they were only given a reward intermittently, variably, where the monkeys couldn't predict when they were going to get this reward, the dopamine levels in their brain actually rose to the level of someone on cocaine. And that's what happens with a relationship with narcissists. They go back and forth. The narcissists go back and forth between love bombing and devaluing, and love bombing and devaluing. And so you are left with almost being addicted to, in a physiological way, to wanting their praise, to wanting that love bomb, because they start out so charming and they really try to set themselves up to be the perfect person for you and hold out all these things that they're going to do for you, or even do things for you right at that time. I mean, if you ever watched the Dirty John miniseries, you recall that guy was just setting himself to be up to be perfect for this successful single businesswoman. He was getting her dry cleaning and making smoothies for her in the morning and all these things at the same time that he was isolating her from her family and turning people against her. So they go through these phases of the relationship. So what happens when you are doing battle with a narcissist is they just become that same person, but on steroids. So it's so much worse. They turn up the heat because, unfortunately, for narcissists, you're either for them or you're against them. They need an endless amount of supply. And if you are cutting off that supply to them, then they just see you as the enemy.
And for those of you who watch my videos on a regular basis, you know that I've had to work 2 covert narcissists out of my life, and it was not an easy thing. It wasn't husbands, but it was people that were close to me and close enough to do serious damage and cause lots and lots of trauma. And, I'm telling you that if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. Narcissists have a symbiotic relationship with empaths. And, narcissists see that empaths have the qualities that they want. And empaths, we just think that we can love everybody back to health, and, that we have enough love to give. And it just ends up being this black hole. And so they literally, they're often called energy vampires or leeches or parasites or whatever, but they literally suck the life out of you. And it's almost like death by 1,000 cuts. And so when you go to do battle with a narcissist, they're literally um, turning up the heat, because now you're the enemy. Now you no longer have any value for them. So there's no, like, a reasonable person, those of us who are in reasonable land, we think, oh, we can just walk away and wish each other well, and we'll come up with an agreement that's reasonable. And hey, the law provides for certain things, and depending on what kind of battle you're doing with a narcissist. But you can't, that's not how it goes with a narcissist. So if you're getting ready to do battle, or you're in the trenches of doing battle with a narcissist, there are a few things that you can do to beat them at their own game and preserve your own sanity along the way. The first thing is, don't allow them to disrespect you. When you allow them to disrespect you, you're basically giving them permission to do that. And they know how to push your buttons, let me tell you. I mean, especially if you've been in a long-term relationship with this person, they've studied you, they know exactly what your weaknesses are. And so that's where they're going to go. They're going right there to try to make you look as bad as possible. Everything you say or do is going to be turned against you, used against you, twisted, manipulated. So what you're going to have to do is just maintain your own level of dignity, maintain your own level of respect, and demand respect from them. If they are screaming, yelling, trying to talk to you in a way that's overly emotional, and they're not in control, they want you to be out of control too, because they get supply, they get narcissistic supply by seeing you squirm. So by just maintaining that, hey, we're not going to have this conversation. You're not being respectful to me. This is not productive. We'll have this conversation when you can be respectful to me. Same thing if they are lighting you up in text messages or lighting you up in emails, and saying all sorts of disrespectful things. You can just simply respond and say, I disagree with what you're saying. Please do not speak to me that way. It is disrespectful. And, and then respond to the parts of it that you might have to respond to, like, what time are you picking up the kids, or something like that. But other than that, you're not going to get into the trenches with them and sling that same sort of mud. You're going to demand respect from them, and you're going to condition them that this is how it's going to go. If they want you to interact with them, they're going to have to respect you. And it's going to drive them insane when you do that. Believe me. Okay, the next thing that you can do is document, document, document. And we cannot say this enough, those of us who are in this field and professionals in this area. You just never know what's going to end up being your leverage. And when you're dealing with narcissists, you have to have a super strong strategy, and you have to be able to create leverage. And, I often hear people ask me, what is leverage? What does that look like? And leverage can be a smoking gun, like the one thing that for sure the narcissist doesn't want anyone to know. Or it could be something like that the narcissist is more motivated to resolve your differences than you are. Or it can be an accumulation of things. It can be, you know, 15 different text messages that show that they're a liar, or and you create an exhibit that shows that. You know, it could be that they didn't show up for picking up the kids on time 20 times in a row, or they changed the schedule every single time that they were supposed to take the kids, or whatever. But, you know, it could be any accumulation of those things. And so it's really, really important to do that documentation, even if it seems mundane. You know, just keep the app open on your, you know, on your phone, the Notes app, or there's apps where you can actually they pay, you know, to have a documentation feature or whatever. But basically, you just don't really know what's going to be the pattern that you're going to be able to bring out, or what's going to be that leverage. And, you know, for sure, the leverage is always going to be around what is their biggest motivation, which is, you know, the one thing they don't want to come out. It's going to be around their ego, because the thing about narcissists is, you know, they're just always in this mode of self-preservation. They're actually very easy to figure out. And narcissists are the most afraid, most scared little personalities on the planet. They have fragile egos because they have no sense of inner value. All of their value comes from the external. So uh, when you are looking at your documentation and figuring out what your leverage is, you're going to want to think about what is their biggest motivation? What is it that they really don't want brought out? And what is it that's going to make them look bad? Because narcissists do not want to look bad, especially in front of people that they really respect. So if somebody is involved that they really respect, such as a mediator or other lawyers or the judge, especially the judge, they're not going to want to look bad. So document, document, document everything. Okay. You never know when you're going to need it. If this is all sounding really good to you so far, and you are so ready to start doing the things that I'm telling you to do, give me an amen in the comments. Okay, the third thing that you can do is figure out what kind of narcissist you're dealing with and understand what behaviors each one uh, engages in. So some of it is similar. All narcissists engage in certain types of behaviors like gaslighting and manipulation, but they do it in subtly different ways depending on the type of narcissist that you're dealing with, whether it's covert, malignant, or grandiose. And you will want to brush up on the different types of narcissists so that you can figure out what kind you're dealing with, and then find out what behaviors they engage in. And once you do that, then you will expect it. You're going to go, oh, there's that person being that covert narky self. That's what they do. And you won't take it as personally, because you'll just understand that that's the way they act. Okay. So the third thing you can do is figure out what kind of narcissist you're dealing with, brush up on the types of behaviors associated with each narcissist, and then expect them to act like themselves. They don't change. Narcissists do not change. They can pretend like they know, like, I mean, they're very good at pretending. They do know what good behavior looks like. That's how they were able to rope you in the first place. And that's how they parade around the world and get people to think that they're so great. Especially covert narcissists are really, really good at that. But you're going to want to figure out what kind you're dealing with, and then not be surprised when they just act like themselves. Okay, the fourth thing is, when you are getting ready to ask for something from the narcissist, you're going to want to ask for way more than what you actually want. The narcissist is going to want to feel like they beat you, like they got to you, because they get supply from that. Their egos won't allow you to win, at least on paper. So if you are ready to just give them a certain amount, give away a certain amount that you control, that you decide ahead of time, I'm going to be willing to take this much, or I'll be willing to give up this thing. But act like it's like the one thing you definitely don't want to give up. Because if there's something that's super important to you, then that's the one thing that they're going to want to make sure that you don't get. So you kind of playing a game here, and I call it ethically manipulating the manipulator. But basically, you're going to want to give them um, certain things that you kind of decide ahead of time that you were willing to give, and then um, work back to what you actually want. And then when you get there, you have to act like, oh my God, I can't believe I had to give up so much, and this is just awful, and oh, you really took advantage of me and whatever. But you can just go home and smile and pour your champagne or whatever, and do it in the privacy of your own home after you've won the things that you wanted. And number 5, the last one is, I take it from like this old commercial, never let them see you sweat, but really you never want to let them see you sweat, cry, get emotional, lose control. Then they get supply from that. If you need to, cry in the bathroom, and then come back out, splash water on your face. If you wear makeup and you're a female, whatever, put makeup back on. If you're a guy, just splash water in your face, comb your hair, whatever you need to do to just maintain control, and never let them see that they are getting under your skin. Because as soon as they see that, then they know they have you. If you know you're going to have to interact with them, and let's say it's a school meeting or it's a mediation or something like that, don't get there too early, get there on time. Don't give them opportunities to grab you and try to manipulate you, because that's when they'll start to get under your skin again. Remember what I said at the beginning, these narcissists, they know how to push your buttons. So never let them see you sweat. All right. I'll admit it, I'm that person. I'm the one the night before a birthday, an anniversary, or any kind of special occasion, I'm frantically searching the aisles for the right card, and one that doesn't seem kind of corny or cringeworthy. You know the struggle, right? But then I found Moonpig. It's a total game changer. They have tons of adorable, funny, even heartfelt designs ready to go, and you can even personalize them, which is super cool. You can even upload your favorite photos or tweak the text to make it uniquely you. And they'll even suggest clever messages if you're feeling stuck. Oh, and no more forgetting birthdays or scrambling for addresses. Moonpig lets you save everything in one place and even sends you reminders. Plus, they've got the opportunity to upload gift cards from all your favorite places like Sephora or Starbucks, so you can really nail that perfect gift vibe. Once you've designed your card, they'll even mail it for you, or if you want to hand deliver it, they'll send it to you with a cool envelope. So guess what? This is your chance. Your first card is totally free. Just use the code FREE and go to moonpig.com/US/negotiate. Seriously, stop stressing and start impressing. Make someone's day with Moonpig. Try it right now. Psychological tricks to win any negotiation. And you know what? Sometimes the first negotiation that you're doing is in the morning when you wake up, with your own self, with your own self-worth. I always say I can't even leave my own thoughts unsupervised. Okay, so the very first thing is, when you're walking into that room to negotiate, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to walk in with power. I want you to walk in with total confidence, because the first thing that people notice is that with that air of power, because that is the first thing that people feel. You tell people what to think. People will think what you tell them to think before you even open your mouth. Use that body language. All right. You walk in with total confidence, and then you use their name, even like being willing to negotiate at their place, all of that sort of thing. And by the way, your colors, the colors that you wear, that can matter too. And I actually have a whole video on just that topic, but that's for another whole video, and you can go and check that out. clothing colors totally can make a difference. Definitely check out that video on that topic. All right. By the way, you're definitely going to want to stay till the end because, you know, the end is, of course, I'm going to save the best one for the last. All right. Number 2, know your opponent's weaknesses, of course, because you're going to do your research. You're going to do your research. You're going to do your research for yourself. You're going to figure out what are your arguments. You're going to do that. What people don't think about is doing the arguments, figuring it out what the other side is going to argue. So many people forget about thinking about what the other side is going to argue as if you are in the other side's shoes. And then this is like so so good, so good, so good. This is a psychological trick that is like the best. The best. You ready for it? When you go in, address their arguments before they even have a chance to bring them up. What you're going to do is you're going to say, I know that you're going to say this, that you're going to argue this. And here's my response. Here's why your argument is crap. So now you've already taken the wind out of their sails. That is such a good psychological trick to win against them in any negotiation. Okay. So now you've walked in with confidence. You've used their name. You've said, hi, hello, I'm here. And you've sat down, you've already said, oh, I know what you're about to argue. You're going to say this. And here's why your argument is total crap. Now, what are they going to do? So that's number 1 and 2. Pretty good, right? I still got 4 more to go. Stay with me. Number three is be completely and totally unflappable no matter what. They can say whatever they want to say, and you're just like, because you know what? They are trying to trigger you, especially those narcissists. They want to trigger you. That is what they want to do so bad. So bad. They try so hard to trigger you, and you're just like, So I want you to stay strong. Stay strong. And I want you to put that in the comments right now. Stay strong. You heard what they said, but you're staying strong, right? You're not taking the bait, staying strong. Number 4 is you're reading the other person's emotions and you're mirroring them. That kind of like throws them off their game too. You're like, oh, okay. Like you're kind of empathizing with them. You're like kind of there with them. That's really, really important to kind of like mirror them because you want to just let them know that you're kind of there with them. You're empathizing with them. You let them know you're feeling them. People want to know that they matter. They want to know, they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, they want to know that they matter. All people want to feel valued, and no one is walking away, whatever their worst case scenario is. It's not happening. Okay. I mean, both sides are going to have to give a little here. They're going to have to feel like they're feeling seen and heard in this situation. So make sure you're reading their emotions. You kind of barter a little bit with this. Okay. So that's number 4. Number 5 is you use my slay approach. Yes, you want to slay this negotiation. And how you slay the negotiation is you use my slay approach. Strategy, leverage, anticipate, and focus on you. You have to have a super strong strategy. You use invincible leverage. You anticipate what the narcissist is going to do and being 2 steps ahead of them. And you focus on you, your case, and your position. Right? Strategy. You have a super strong strategy, leverage, invincible leverage, especially with a narcissist. And remember, with a narcissist, you're focusing on their supply. I've got lots and lots of other videos on all that stuff. And you got to get my slay program to get the good stuff on that. Right? And number 6, really good psychological trick is always be ready to walk away. Always be ready to walk, because
if you aren't, they know they have you, right?
Now, you're getting ready to negotiate with a narcissist. You should never, ever, ever negotiate with a narcissist without these things. So number one is a powerful, powerful, powerful mindset. Remember that you and you alone define your value. You are inherently valuable. And there's different ways to define value, by the way. So, value can be anything from how you feel inside to the value that you bring to the table as far as money or leverage or anything like that. But you define your value. You and you alone define your value. And one thing I really want you to understand is that people will think what you tell them to think. And you want to make sure that you are communicating to these people that you are powerful, that you are the one who's in control. Okay, so that's number one, is make sure that you have a powerful, powerful mindset. The second thing that you should never, ever, ever even think about negotiating without is having all of your arguments ready to go, having your research done, having your leverage ready to go. If you don't have all of your arguments ready and your research done, and research on your side, by the way, and also researching as if you are the other person, because you want to make sure that you are anticipating what it is that they are going to say. So you do your research on your side, and then you also do your risk assessment. You need to make sure, is this an argument I really want to make? Or how much research do I really need to do, and how much money do I want to spend researching? In other words, a lot of times people think that narcissists are hiding assets or hiding money, and a lot of times they do. And if you want to know more about how narcissists hide money or assets, check out my video on what kinds of financial tricks narcissists play, especially in divorce. I have a whole video on that. But they a lot of times do hide money, or maybe are hiding income, or maybe they're paid in cash or something like that. So you need to kind of do some risk assessment on that by saying, okay, do I want to hire a forensic accountant? Do I want to hire somebody who can maybe find assets for me? There's guys out there that I know that can find assets even in other countries. But, sometimes they're expensive sometimes. And sometimes, you have to think about, how much money do I want to spend? How much money do I really think is out there? You don't want to spend a few thousand to get back a few thousand. If you're going to spend a few thousand, you want to get back, 50 grand or 100 grand, right? So do your risk assessment and making sure that you are prepared. So that's the next thing. And the next thing is never, ever, ever negotiate without being ready to anticipate the types of emotional triggers that you're going to have. So if you're really, really feeling powerless, and you're really, really feeling like the other person is going to have the upper hand on you, then you want to make sure that you are going to be ready for that. And definitely check out my video too on negotiating with someone when you think that they're more powerful than you, because I offer lots and lots more tips on that, and just making sure that you come across super, super powerful. So you want to have all of your arguments ready to go. So when I want to see in the comments right now that you are going to be ready by saying ready in the comments. The next thing that you want to have ready before you even walk into that room is what your first offer is going to be, and also what your choke point is going to be. You want to make sure that you have your walk away point, because when you get into that room, you are definitely going to be triggered, especially when you're dealing with the narcissist, because they want to take you down. That's their goal. They don't want to settle this. Remember, they're getting narcissistic supply from making you squirm and making you miserable. That's why they constantly move goalposts. And you should definitely check out my video on why narcissists move goalposts too. But they don't want to come to an agreement. They like making you squirm. So you will definitely be triggered. So before you even walk into the room, one of the most important things you have is knowing what your best offer is and what your last offer is going to be. What's your choke point? What's your walk away point? I actually had a client one time who said, they called it their vomit point. Like, that's the part, that's the point at which I throw up and walk away. But whatever you want to call it, what's your bottom line? What's the point at which you go, this is it, I'm not negotiating anymore? And it's so important that you come up with all of these things before you walk into the room, because that day will be an emotional day. All right, so never, ever, ever negotiate without being fully prepared, knowing what your first offer is going to be, knowing what your walkaway point is going to be, and then sticking to that.
So I cannot wait to dive into this. I'm watching this series. It's a 6-part series. It's predicted to sweep the Golden Globes. It's up for every single major award, including Hugh Grant, Nicole Kidman, the entire series, David E. Kelly, the whole shebang. And it was so fascinating to me as an attorney who helps people negotiate with narcissists. I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many facets of this that really could be helpful for people. So I wanted to break it down for you. So the first thing is that, here's a guy who somehow suffered some sort of trauma when he was a kid. And by the way, spoiler alert, I should say that, spoiler alert, don't watch this unless you've already watched the series. And if you haven't watched the series, go watch it and then come back and watch this analysis. Okay. So, all right, going back to it. So he had something happen to him in his childhood, which ends up coming out later on. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But here's a guy who was extremely charming, very handsome. I mean, it's Hugh Grant, for God's sake. It's the rom-com guy, right? And he plays this doctor who takes care of kids with cancer. He is married to Nicole Kidman. They have a son who's, I think, around 12, something like that. And he seems to have pretty much the perfect life. There he goes. He goes to a fundraiser, and there's this woman there that his wife, Nicole Kidman, had just recently met. She's another mother at the school and doesn't let on that he knows her. And, he gets a call in the middle of the fundraiser and says, I have to go to the office or back to the hospital. I have an emergency. So Nicole Kidman ends up going home, goes to bed. He gets home much later. He's very upset, tells her that he had lost a kid with cancer, she had passed away. And then the next morning he leaves for what she thinks is a medical conference. And then her life starts to become unraveled. And she finds out that he wasn't at the medical conference. He left his phone at home. Meanwhile, this woman that they saw at the fundraiser is also found dead. And all these things start coming out, like that he had been fired from the hospital like 3 months before, that he had been having an affair with this woman who just passed away. And then he ends up, coming back into her life, and a couple of days later, and tells her, I didn't do it, there's no way I could have murdered somebody, me, I know it looks bad, I was having an affair with her, but I didn't do it, I didn't kill her. And this guy is so charming that he gets everybody in his world to believe that he didn't do it, because he has relied on his charm for so long. So there's so many facets of what happens here when a narcissist starts to become undone because the fence is being built around them. And this is what I tell you guys all the time. So building strategy, creating that leverage, so important, because that's what makes them start to make mistakes. This is when you start to see the narcissist come unglued. So what happens is, and spoiler alert one more time, so you can't say I didn't warn you. So the guy ends up murdering that woman that night of the fundraiser because she is threatening to expose him. She's saying, I think that we should tell people. I want your son can be a great big brother to my son. Everybody in the world's going to know. He couldn't handle the fact that all the people that he respected, including his wife, including his son, it was very critical to him that he maintained that their sense of adulation about him. He was not able to take that. And that's when he started to become undone. And that's when he started to make mistakes, huge mistake, by murdering this woman. Then he starts making another whole series of mistakes. He tries to go back to the well of the things that he knows how to do. And this is what I want you guys to understand. So you see him hoovering. He goes back to the wife. Oh, come on, honey. We love each other. We can get through this. Back to the husband, the son. We can be a family. We can do this together. He tries holding the wife's hand. He tries hugging her. He even thinks that he can charm the husband of the woman that he murdered. He goes to his house. The son is there. He says hello to them. He's trying to charm them into believing that he did not do it. Yes, he did bad things, but he is not a killer. And so, and by the way, he can show emotion when he needs to, which is something that a lot of covert narcissists are really able to do. And especially the really smart narcissists, they know how to turn on the empathy. They know how to turn on the charm. They know how to make themselves look like they're good people. But they're also prone to this magical thinking, this distorted thinking that they can get everybody to just be charmed by them. That they can get people to forget about what it is that they did. They want people to move on or project what it is that they did onto somebody else. He's trying to blame the husband. He's trying to blame anybody else that he can. So that's what happens when they start to become undone. They start to make mistakes. They start to go and rely on the things that worked for them, the love bombing, the gaslighting. I mean, even the gaslighting of the wife, despite exactly what you see, how it looks to everybody that he's the one that did the murder, he's telling everybody, I didn't do it. I couldn't have done it. And that's exactly how narcissists operate. They try to take things that are very obvious and just say what you see with your own eyes, what you hear with your own ears ain't happening. That's not the truth. So, and there's some speculation about narcissists around whether or not they just, despite intellectually knowing what the truth is, they just have to live in this distorted way of thinking, this magical way of thinking. And that really came out at the end of this movie when he's talking to the son, for the end of the series, the last episode, where he says to the son, the person that did that wasn't me. That's not the dad, and it's almost like that's how he can justify it all to himself, because it's not the person that he wants himself to be. It's not the dad. The last part of his undoing is where they find out that the son had found the murder weapon at their beach house where he had been hiding out, and the son actually runs it through the dishwasher twice to protect him and holds on to it to protect the father, because he knew the father had done it. Can you imagine this 12-year-old son? So when that happens, in order to try to protect himself one more time, he goes and he says to Nicole Kidman, the mother, do you think that the son could have done it? And it was in that moment that Nicole Kidman was like, okay, clearly he did it. I can't believe that he would actually try to pin this on our 12-year-old son. Oh my gosh. But she's very shrewd. She doesn't let on. So this is where I talk about ethically manipulating the manipulator. This is exactly the kind of thing that you guys can do too. And so what she does is she shrewdly says, "Oh, put me on the stand. I'll talk about what a great guy he is." So in the meantime, she has her best friend, who also happens to know the prosecutor, let the prosecutor know that when this guy was a teenager, he was supposed to be watching, he was like 14, he was supposed to be watching his 4-year-old sister. He was doing something in the kitchen. She ends up going outside, gets hit by a car, and dies. Apparently, the mother told Nicole Kidman, I never saw him have any moment of grief. I never saw him have any moment of uh, empathy or care about that situation. He didn't even seem traumatized. She actually said she thought he was a sociopath. And apparently Nicole Kidman, who was playing a therapist in this movie, had also told this friend that she was pretty sure that Hugh Grant had narcissistic personality disorder. So she gets on the stand. She says, "Oh, yeah, he's a great dad, great husband, wonderful. He could never do any of these things." But she knew that the prosecutor was going to cross examine her and ask her, "Well, but didn't his own mother, say these things? And didn't you yourself diagnose him as this?" And so she was able to ethically manipulate the situation so that she wasn't the one who was actually saying these things, but she got the prosecutor to force it out of her. So obviously that ended up to be his final undoing. So, what I want you to know when you are negotiating with a narcissist is you've got to create that leverage. And if you want to know more about that, check out my video on creating leverage when dealing with narcissists. And um, you also need to not fall prey to their well of tricks, their to-do list of tricks that they go back to: the gaslighting, the manipulating, the hoovering, the love bombing, all those things that they're trying to do because they know that they are being cornered. And I also want you to know that as they start to become unglued, they start to make mistakes. If you want to know more about the collapse of a narcissist, I have a video on that as well. But that's what happens to them. They start to make mistakes, and you'll be right there to catch it and then use that as leverage against them. You don't have to get upset. You don't have to go crazy. You don't have to, you don't even have to give up. You can keep going. But remember, when you're negotiating with a narcissist, it is a long game. You can't expect instant results, but you can sit back and watch them uh, basically build their own noose. And they can do that. And that's when you'll be there to make sure that you use that as leverage so that you can end up with a fair result and come out hopefully somewhat unscathed from this situation.